Hey everybody, welcome. New day and new time. We're going to do our live a little bit different schedule. Hopefully a few more of you guys can join us. So today we are going to talk about a Social Security. And it's not just Social Security because is what it is, but Social Security is scheduled to run out of money. So a couple of articles that I pulled today are some of the things that I want to touch upon today and talk about some myths. And also, I would love to hear from you on what are some of your worries. If you are going to be relying on Social Security when you retire, if you are already retired and you are relying on Social Security, I would love to hear kind of what your experience has been. And what are you thinking? Because retirement is 30% of our lives. It's important to make sure that the money lasts you, which is the biggest concern a lot of people have. So I'm just going to give it a few more minutes and then we're going to jump in and talk about things. But in the meantime, if you have some questions, feel free to post them so that way we can have a really, really good discussion, because I have lots of things to share with you. And although the articles have a negative connotation to them, where they're talking about program facing funding crisis is what they're all saying. My goal is always, when I'm working with clients, when I'm talking to everybody, is to say, okay, what exactly does that mean specifically for you? Is there anything that you can do yourself? So that way you can sleep a little bit better. So that way you can take that information and actually kind of figure it out. So let me share with you the article that I have in mind that we're going to discuss. Let's look at it, and then we're going to jump in and actually talk about. So this is what I am talking about. Is counting on Social Security to fund your retirement? Think again. Which just came out 2 days ago. And here are some of the things that are kind of like the key takeaways from this article that I am reading. So first one is, without congressional action, the benefits will have to be cut by 21% across the board, including for those already retired, beginning in 2033. So we are less than 10 years away. The hard truth is that Social Security is not a savings program, and workers will have no ownership of the Social Security taxes that they pay. The third one is, if coupled with a personal ownership option, Social Security reform could help more Americans build wealth that could increase their retirement incomes. So here's what's happening. In just about 9 years, the oldest Gen Xers will reach Social Security normal retirement age of 67. And actually, if you think about it, there are 10,000 folks that are retiring every day, and most of the baby boomer generation is going to be 65 by the year of 2030, which is only 3 years away from the crisis that is being discussed today. And they're going to have rude awakening when they learn that the program's trust fund is empty, leaving it able to pay out only as much benefits as it takes from the paychecks of those that are working. And this is actually straight from the Social Security Trustees 2024 report. So what they're talking about is that simply maintaining current scheduled Social Security benefits is going to require large tax increases. So there are some suggestions that are here that are being kind of thrown in there. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. This is what they're saying it may potentially happen, right? And kind of like there's a shortfall. What they're saying is right now they are paying out benefits every month, and they're also collecting money every month, and they're about almost 4% short in terms of the deficit percentage. So there's this one, and then there's another article that I thought that was helpful that I wanted to share with you as well, that I found helpful as well. And this one is from Motley Fool. I'm just going to look at it. This one talks about the fact that Baby boomers are retiring, life expectancies are rising, and total benefits paid out have increased. However, not a lot of things were done in terms of the changes. So this is where kind of what the concerns are. So this is what I wanted to share with you, because that is the topic that you're going to see being discussed more and more. And there are some interesting takes on it that I saw. And that's kind of what I wanted to bring up with you today. So the first thing is what I think is going to happen, because that's what I see happening in a lot of other places, is that they're going to bring it up. They're going to say, we have fires to put out. Here's what is happening. And then nothing is going to get done, because they're like, well, we have 9 years to kind of figure things out. Until they have some kind of hard deadline, that is when things are going to happen. But I have a feeling that they're going to probably wait a little bit longer until they're forced to make decisions, until they're forced to make changes. So one of the things that I saw that I thought that was interesting was Kiplinger, one of my great resources, has put out a retirement report, and this one is for April. And they also talked about it. The first article that they have actually here right in front of, the first page on their report is the looming crisis for Social Security. And I really found their research really to the point. And what I liked about their article is that it's not screaming kind of like, oh my God, here's what's happening, but it's actually kind of talking through and saying, okay, this is what is the reality and the potential of what's going to happen. And how are we going to figure this out? Here's what we see. Here are some options. I wanted to share these with you, and then you let me know what you think. So first of all, what they're talking about now is that the system pays out more in benefits than it collects in payroll taxes, as I already mentioned to you. So the current rate, the Social Security percentage, is 12.4%. Half of that is being paid by workers, and half of that is being paid by the employers. And right now, there are about 67 million retirees, surviving spouses, and orphan children who are getting benefits. And if something is not done, if things are not kind of figured out and action is not put in place, there will be a cut of 27% beginning in 2034, which is what the program trustees are talking about. So roughly right around there, year 33, 34, 35 is what I saw. So the shortage is right now is 3.7% is what they're talking about. Now, this is not the first time that the Social Security Fund has ran into issues. If you recall, they had some issues back in 1980s, which was about 20 years ago or so. They had some things that were going on. And at that time, back in the 80s, here's what they did. This was during Ronald Reagan administration. So at the time, they were doing it pay-as-you-go program, which was kind of like, to me, it was like, okay, we're just going to make it work with what we got right now without actually planning for the future. So what they did is they changed it to a pay-in-advance program, which I think is a little bit more thoughtful and being proactive, not just reacting and saying, we're just going to see what happened. So what they did was they did that pay in advance program, which was actually a change in the way things were working since 1935. So that was a big step. That was almost 50 years of doing the same thing, but the reforms had to happen because at that time they were having issues as well. So another important factor that I want you guys to think about that we are facing right now is the fact that things in the economy and how we do things and technology and internet, all of those things have really made changes in a lot of the things that we have to consider. So an example is that back in the 80s, there were comfortable retirements that you can make happen, sort of like a three-legged stool, right? So not four, but three. So you could retire comfortably because you knew that you had a company-sponsored pension from where you worked for 30, 40 years. Then you said, okay, I'm going to have my pension, then I'm going to have my Social Security, and then I'm going to have my savings. So there were three things that were coming, and you felt comfortable because you knew that you had plans and you had 3 different sources. What is happening now, you probably guys will know that, like, in my situation, I've never had any company offer me a company sponsored pension where you don't contribute to it. It's called a defined benefit plan, where they tell you if you work for more than 5 years, typically, which is what was my example, you then, after you're working for so many years, you're going to be vested. And then by the time normal retirement age comes, you're going to get a certain monthly pension. A lot of the companies went away from that because everybody was tightening their belts, right? So the corporations were replacing those pension plans with regular 401k plans where they said, well, you need to contribute your own money into a 401k plan, and that is going to be you putting money away, and that's going to be your pension plan. And to help you out, they said, okay, we're going to offer you some kind of match. Some people will do, dollar for dollar. They might say $2 for $2. Every company did it differently. A lot of companies don't do the match, or they changed their structure. So now you are just putting your money away, and the benefit there for you. And I am overall a proponent, because it's a big part of you preparing for your retirement, is to say, well, 401k, I'm putting money away on the pre-tax dollars, which means that I am saving on taxes right now. Now, it does tell me that you're going to have to pay taxes when you pull that money out, but right now you're reducing your taxable income. So, and again, it's still savings. So I'm a big proponent of that still, and I'm also a big proponent of doing it on autopilot. Every paycheck, you should be contributing that money, because you know what? It's better than nothing. So that's how things changed. And now your 3-legged stool became a 2-legged stool, which is what you have is your Social Security and your savings, which 401k, or putting money in the IRA, different types, or just putting money in other vehicles like stock market and some other things, is what you have to rely on. So now you have really 2 legs, and they're not very balancing. You can't really do that. So the economy itself also has changed since the 1980s. And here's what I found interesting. So the formula the Social Security Administration uses to calculate the maximum pay subject to the payroll tax did not anticipate the economy and the changes on where, how the professionals have been salaried. So to give you an example, the current cap that we have is $168,060. Okay. So there are quite a few people who are professionals that make more than that, which means that they're not being taxed on the difference, right? So, for example, this is what Kiplinger is stating, that in 2020, 63% of the money paid out in raises went to just 184,000 people making $1 million or more. Right. So if you that was like a kind of like an annual analysis of W-2 wage reports. Right. So there are quite a few people that are making above that threshold that are not contributing towards a Social Security fund because they make more than that threshold. So this is what they're saying, is that there were a shift of income sources away from work and towards investment gains. So the IRS data is showing that wages and salaries accounted for 78% of national income back in 1993, but it's only 61% in 2021. The rest of that came from increased business profits, capital gains, dividends, and some royalties, none of which are subject to Social Security taxes because it's not earned income. It's not your W-2 where you get a paycheck. So here's the problem. So this is what's happening right now. So here are some of the suggestions and solutions and kind of brainstorming that everybody's talking about. And I wanted to ask your opinion on what you think might be best. I kind of read through it and I highlighted some things. And what I'm happy about is that at least people are thinking and trying to come up with good solutions and suggestions. And it's probably not going to be very much black and white. It's probably going to be a combination of a couple of things, right? Like a game plan. So the first one was proposed by a couple of senators where they really took it completely in the opposite direction. They said, you know what? Let's end Social Security. And I'm like, okay. However, they didn't suggest anything about how they're going to finance Social Security without having the dedicated payroll tax, right? So, because if that was to happen, you would affect more than 59 million retirees and their dependents and over 9 million of disabled people. So probably not a good idea, because them suggesting it, but they're not actually coming up with an actual game plan, right? You're going to suggest something drastic as that, yet you're not saying, okay, and here's how we're going to figure out another way. There was no other way suggested. The second one was privatizing Social Security, where you are talking about doing some investment. And the idea here was that the younger generation, millennials, Gen Zs, could probably figure out a way to make that money and then help themselves and save up in their retirement. And that was proposed actually back by President George W. Bush. He was like, let's maybe partially privatize Social Security. So that's also kind of like an iffy thing. The next suggestion is raising the retirement age. And here's what that would look like. So in the beginning of Social Security, the age was 65. And right now it's 67, depending on your year of birth. So anyone born after 1960, that is your year. And also what that means is that if you were to change the full retirement age to maybe 69 or 70, that's also cutting you out of some of the benefits as well. So it's about like $42,000 cut to someone. So talking about going from 65 or 67, going to 69 or 70, that's also going to be a challenge, because it depends on what kind of work you do, right? If you are sitting behind your desk and you're crunching numbers, that might be something that you can handle, because it's not so much as a wear and tear on your body. But if you are outside, if you are laying floors or you are building homes, right? You're outside, you're doing hands-on work, you have a lot more wear and tear in your body. And are you really physically able to go until you're 69 and 70? So the idea here was to create some kind of a two-tier system, and there's going to be circumstances, this and that, which to me sounds pretty complicated. So may or may not be. The next option would be to raise the actual payroll tax rate. So right now it's 12.4. The idea is to take it somewhere to maybe 15 or 16%, because that gap that we have now is going to be covered. And that should help. So if that was done, it would actually fuel the economy with quite $1 billion. I think the research was that I was reading that if they were to do that for the year of 22 and raise it to, I believe, 16%, they would have like an extra $300 billion that they would have in their fund. And that should definitely ease the worries of a lot of people. The next option that we have on the block is to raise the tax cap. And to me, I was like, okay, that sounds interesting as a possibility, where you could either lift that ceiling of 168,600, or you could eliminate that completely. All right. So the idea here is saying, well, do the same thing as if you're doing for Medicare. Okay. So Medicare policy is you are just taxing 100%. That's what Medicare does. So why can't we apply the same thing to Social Security? So if you were to apply the tax to all the pay in 2022, you would have raised an additional $235 billion, according to some rough calculations. So I thought that was pretty neat. And of course, with that, then we're also talking about taxing all pay, which is applying the Medicare policy on doing that. And that may not be a bad idea as well. So those are kind of some of the ideas and things that are floating around right now among different professionals. And there was a Gallup poll that was done between some of the just general population. What they were asked was to choose between cutting benefits or raising taxes. Twice as many people, 61%, actually favored higher taxes in that poll. So I thought that was pretty neat. So let me see if we have any questions in the meantime. Of course, I have some other goodies that I want to share with you, that's for sure. And let me see. Okay. All right. So talking about Social Security, I think that the fund is not going to run out of money because they will be forced to make some decisions and do some things. Just like when there is a budget deficit that the government goes through every so many years, and then they really hustle down and they figure things out and they figure out their budget. And then it's kind of like, okay, we kind of figure things out for another couple years and then we can just keep on going forward. So I think that they're just going to have to make some changes. I also know that there's lots of myths that are going around about the program, and I wanted to share with you some of them because I thought that was just something interesting. So the first one is that the fund is going to completely run out of money. And that's just not going to happen because the program is financed by payroll taxes. All of us work. There's going to be deductions that are happening every 2 weeks, every payroll like clockwork. The money is still going in. It's just a matter of, is there enough money that is going in or not? So that's the first question. Myth number 2, young adults are not going to benefit from Social Security. You know, in the conversation with a lot of young adults may not even understand what that means. I know that for myself, I'm not counting on Social Security. And I think that's a big distinction. One thing is you say, well, I'm going to have Social Security when I retire, and I'm going to count on it as my main source of income, which unfortunately a lot of people nowadays do count on that. And that program was never designed to be as your main source of income. It was designed to support you if you had your pension, if you had your savings, to help you and support you in your golden years. So with the younger generation, when I'm talking to my family and I'm talking to my kids, I'm going to tell them that there's going to be Social Security, but I don't want you to think, well, I'm just going to be fine because I'm going to have Social Security to help me. I don't want them to think like that and be complacent and comfortable. So the idea is you have a good life, you still have to save up, you still have to invest, and then Social Security is just going to be an added benefit, is how I look at it. Myth number 3, the shortfall makes collecting earlier a wiser move. And yes, this is something that is a hot topic also when you are thinking about Social Security. Do I take it early? Do I wait until my normal retirement age? Do I maybe wait until later, until maybe the 70s, so that way kind of the money grows, right? Because 1 year that you skip taking it, it's going to grow by about 8%, roughly is the number. So I have done some other videos, kind of like a food for thought that you may want to look at on my channel. But there's really 3 things that I want you to think about when you're thinking about your retirement, which part of that is also figuring out your Social Security, is time, money, and health. So, and all of these 3 factors are going to matter differently to you because all of you have different circumstances. Everybody has their own story and their own journey on that you're on. If you by yourself, it's a different journey. If you are a female, that's a very different journey too, because a lot of females, when they became moms, if they chose to do that, they took time off from working, which means that you may not even qualify for Social Security. So that's like a whole nother conversation that I'm definitely want to have and explore in my other videos. But the idea here is that if your health is not where it needs to be and you know yourself better, I want you to think about it in the next 5 to 10 years. If your health is shaky and you know it's not going to get better, then you may want to retire sooner and you may want to take your Social Security sooner. If you feel that you still have to work, because a lot of people still do have to work, maybe they want to work, which is not a bad thing, then maybe you can postpone a little bit. And also, it doesn't mean that you can't take your Social Security, even if you don't need it, and invest it. You can invest it. You can put it in a high yield savings account. You can put that money and buy some stocks. There's lots of things that you can do to make that money last you longer and really work for you. So don't think just because you took Social Security, that's it. That's all you kind of have to work with. You can really be creative and focus on the things that you can control. And then, of course, we're talking about time. It depends on, I've had clients that have retired and they were super happy. And then 6 months down the road, the husband passed away and the wife became a widow. And they worked so hard for their retirement, and they diligently saved, and they did everything by the book that they were supposed to do. So I want you to think about the fact that it's not forever. You just never know sometimes. So a lot of that also has to do with really sitting down and just looking at things. If you guys don't have a retirement notebook, you really should. This is one of the things that I recommend to everybody, where you can jot things down. You can write down your concerns. You can write down your plans. This way, it's not just sitting there and rattling in your head like, a hamster on the wheel, but you can create sections. And, one of the sections should be Social Security. How do I feel about it? What are some of the important things to know? This way you are able to sleep at night, because otherwise it's kind of just sitting there in your subconscious and it's eating at you. It's constantly working and is a strain on you because it's wearing you down, right? It's a constant source of energy. So does it make sense to start at an earlier age? It depends. There's no black and white answer, because the answer to that question is going to depend on you. What are you trying to accomplish, where you are in your journey, and what you still want to do, and how many years ahead do you think you have? So the next one is, I thought that was funny, that the federal government has raided the Social Security trust funds. I don't really have an opinion on that. And we'll see. That's just that. So Mervin has a question. Are mortality rates really decreasing? They are. They absolutely are. If you look at, and I don't have the statistics, but if you look at the general things that were happening in the second part of last century, because of the advancements in medicine, because of the advancements in technology, people are definitely living longer. Now, I got some heat on my video where I talked about that you're going to live until the age of 90. And everybody said, oh, you crazy. They're like, the average age is like 77 to 80. And that's what the average is. But I invite you guys to think a little bit bigger and stay positive, because I want you to live until you're 90. I want you to live till you are 100. So that way you can enjoy your golden years and do the things that you want to do, whatever they are. So I want you to keep an open mind, because whatever you think is what you're putting out in the universe is what I really think is going to happen. So if you're going to tell yourself, I'm going to live until I'm 90 or 95, then that's what's going to happen. My own grandma lived until she was 99, and boy, the life that she had. So just keep that as an open mind. So Mervin, thank you for your question. And then myth number 5 is that members of Congress don't pay Social Security taxes. They actually are. So part of the amendments to the Social Security tax in 1983, that was the last major reform, which, if you think about it, 1984, that's 30 years. No, that's 40 years. Wow. So 40 years ago was the last Social Security reform. Some changes are probably due, that's for sure. So as of January of 1984, regardless of when they were first elected to Congress, all members of Congress are contributing and paying Social Security. So I agree. And Mervin is saying that, thank you, you're investing in your health. I honestly, truly believe that investing in your health should be your number one concern, because if you don't have health, you don't have anything else. So just kind of keep that in mind. So a couple of other interesting things that I thought that I was going to share with you is, if you are interested, let's talk about a few tips on increasing your Social Security check. So the first one is, of course, you need to earn a bigger paycheck, right? If the more money you make, the more money you're contributing to the Social Security through your payroll tax. And you know what? Interesting that I talked to a couple of my clients, and one of them was self-employed, and what she did not realize, they had their own company most of the time, and they did really, really well. They really enjoyed their business. But when you're talking about this, you say, you know what, I'm going to report and I'm going to put myself on a very small salary so that way I can pay less in taxes. That's the idea. And some people think that way, those that are entrepreneurs, those are that are self-employed. Yet what a lot of people don't think about is the fact that if you are only reporting a small salary, let's say it's $40,000 or $50,000 a year, you're going to consequently pay a small amount and contribute towards your Social Security, which is what is going to count towards your own potential Social Security benefits. So if you're not counting on it, it may not matter to you. But if you are, it's going to make a big difference. And what is happening now is we're working together on helping her make her plans and helping her downsize from the home that she is right now into something smaller. And she is now in the situation where her Social Security check is pretty small because she never contributed to the fund because they were always claiming a small salary. Now, I'm not an accountant, of course, so I'm not sure if there were some tips and things that they could have done, but that was the general idea that she described to me as to what is happening now, and now it is really affecting her to help her live out throughout her golden years. So just be mindful about that depending if you are working for somebody else, just you get a regular paycheck every 2 weeks, or you're self-employed, or you have some other circumstances that could come into play if you want to rely on your Social Security, depending where you are in your life journey. The second one is work at least 35 years. The formula uses the inflation-adjusted average of your 35 highest years of earnings. So if you only work for 32, you will have 3 years with zero earnings, which is going to drag down your benefit. So go on to Social Security website and just do some general reading so that way you truly understand how the formula works, so that way you can have time to adjust. There were some recommendations that I read that if you wanted to jump up in your salary, the recommendation is, if you can and you want to, because yes, it's change, is to change jobs every 2 to 3 years, because that is how you're going to increase your salary. Maybe you're going to get a sign-on bonus, and that will give you an opportunity to contribute more towards your Social Security savings. The next tip is delaying it as long as possible. So we already talked a little bit about that, but if you are kind of thinking things through, right? So you're not eligible for your primary insurance until you reach your full retirement age, right? Depending on your year of birth. So 67 is after 1960. So if you wanted to delay, you could do that, because every year you delay, you're going to get an extra 8%, right? But again, you need to write down and see what makes more sense to you. Do you really have to work longer? Does it make sense to work longer? Or does it make sense to take the Social Security? Maybe you don't need it. Go ahead and invest it, but then you have the time to do things that you want to do if you have your little bucket list. So we also talk about that. If you are working, avoid collecting a check until your full retirement age. So that's another suggestion. In 2023, if you claim Social Security while you were working, but you haven't reached your full retirement age, Social Security does impose limits on how much you can earn And this is where they're going to withhold $1 for every 2 that you earn. So, and there are some limitations to that too. And every year those numbers do increase because of the cost of living adjustment as well. So once you do reach your formal retirement age, Social Security is not going to withhold part of your benefit, no matter how much you earn. So that is just something also to consideration. Another one that I thought was interesting is called a one-time do-over. It does come with limitations, but it is an option for you. So if you already started receiving Social Security benefits, but now you decided that you want to wait for a larger benefit, you actually have 2 options to increase your checks. So number one, if it's been fewer than 12 months since you were approved for your benefits, you can actually withdraw your application and then reapply later. However, you do have to repay all of the benefits you received, as well as money withheld for taxes and Medicare premiums. So don't jump and say, oh, this is a great idea. You need to make sure that you understand how everything works. And if the second also is if you already are at your formal retirement age, but you haven't reached the age of 70, you can request a Social Security suspend your benefits. So that way you can earn the delayed retirement credits, and then you can reinstate the later. So if that is something that you may want to do, you definitely want to actually research those options and go directly to Social Security to figure out what does that mean for you. Next up is save for your retirement in a Roth account. I do absolutely love Roth accounts, Roth IRAs, and you can contribute to them every year. I think for 23, the max allowed that you could put in there was $6,500. The max for 24 is $7,000. So it did go up. I want you to think about it this way. It is after-tax money that you're putting in to save. You can invest it into some kind of IRA with different focus. You can put it with Fidelity or Vanguard. Vanguard is one of my favorites. And then any money that grows in that account is going to be tax-free forever because you invested after tax dollars, which means that any earnings you can then withdraw when you feel that you have the need for it. It's not going to be taxed. So that's why I love the Roth IRA better than a traditional. But again, it's all part of that big plan, right? We're talking about 401k. We're talking about traditional also IRAs. They're great because they're giving you the savings now. You're getting that break on your taxes, but you will have to pay taxes when you withdraw that money when the time is right for you in your retirement. And that's what that money is for. It's your retirement account, individual retirement account. The average Social Security payment in 2023 was about $1,850. And yes, it's rising because of the cost of living adjustment. And I know that a lot of people were not happy with the 24 cost of living adjustment. It was only 3.2%. But I want you to think bigger with the fact that because the cost of living adjustment for the Social Security was smaller, that means that the economy is doing better, right? That means that the inflation is not as crazy, although all of us are seeing the increases in cost of goods like food. I see it definitely more than 3.2%, that's for sure. And so those were some of the suggestions that they were talking about, kind of like increasing your Social Security benefits. And so we talked about kind of some tips and ideas, and we talked about some of the myths. So do I think there's anything to worry about for us? I think that the news media outlets and the internet makes it sound like it's crisis. I think that things are going to get figured out. It's just going to take some time for the government to figure out what are the best options. And they probably are not going to do it until they absolutely have to. I think government is also procrastinator, like a lot of people. So things are going to get fixed. I think they are. Is the fund going to run out of money? I don't think that it will. Just I kind of invite you to have an open mind and to say, you know what, even though Social Security may be a big part of your planning for retirement, I encourage you not to rely on it as much as you probably want to. Just don't rely on it. Say, you know what, this is great that I'm going to have it. However, I'm going to focus on making my own plans on the things that I can control, on how I'm going to live my life when I decide to retire and have my golden years. So that's what I'm thinking is probably a good idea. So these are kind of like my thoughts on Social Security. I am definitely keeping track on these things because Social Security is a big concern. And I get it. It's a big concern, I think, for more for people who are already retired and they are living on that amount. Because imagine if they had to cut down the pension, the monthly payments by 27%, that's quite a bit. Like if you have your paycheck now and it's getting cut down by 30%, that's going to make up enough for sleepless nights for sure. So what are your thoughts on Social Security? All right, well, this is what I have for you today. We are talking about, yes, there are some concerns, but it doesn't mean that we need to panic. We're just going to keep an eye out on things. And then when the time comes, I'm sure we're going to get more updates. And when we do, then we can take that information, sit down, jot down our own thoughts, and then figure out how those changes are going to either affect or help us with our own kind of like retirement planning. So if no other questions, thank you so much for joining me today. I will see you next week on our live, and next week is going to be a really good one. I have a specialist who is specializing in reverse mortgages, who is going to come on, and we're going to really dive in deep into this program, dispel all the myths and all the bad karma that this product has, figure out who it's the right program for, and who is not the right program, because it's not the right program for everyone. But I promise you, I'm going to answer all of your questions that I already got a ton of. And we're going to really dig in deep to see how this could be a right move for some people. So hopefully you'll join us next Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern time. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next week.